period. All my blacks, brown, and indigenous. Gotta holla if you really feeling this. Gotta holla if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holla if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there chilling?
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is a very important, special podcast. And I want to first give a quick shout out to everybody that's on the live stream and to everyone that's going to be joining us soon. Really appreciate people taking the time to come out and get informed. Very, very important. Very, very important. I also want to give an announcement out that there's going to be a big rally for people that are in Connecticut on the 28th. March for Palestine in New Haven, Connecticut, and it's going to be a big, giant statewide action. So definitely, if you're in Connecticut, please come out. This light is showing all definition of my hair. That's crazy. But anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest for today. And you have met Paolo before, but Paolo has brought some friends, as you see on the flyer. And we're going to talk about a very, very important conversation in Latin America. And we're also going to quickly cover what's going on in the Middle East. And without further ado, let's bring them on. So we have one more guest that's going to be joining us shortly. How are you doing today, Hugo?
Doing well. Really, thank you so much for having us. And, I'm really looking forward to meeting you. I've actually, ironically, been following you on Twitter for a while. So
really?
I checked off the Instagram as well. And yeah, really, really excited to be on the show and to start following it as well.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure I'm following you as well too after this, because I need to make sure I'm always following revolutionaries. So we have Hugo and we have Paolo, and we have one more guest that's going to be showing up real soon, Nicholas. But without further ado, we can get started. First of all, the first thing that we should talk about, very, very, very important, and I would love for whoever wants to go first, just your thoughts on what's going on in the Middle East. It seems that the United States is now trying to focus on talking about the fake projects of nuclear bombs that Iran apparently has when they really don't. And this is a total distraction from what's going on in Palestine. I want to hear you guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I can go first. This is the new Saddam Hussein. This is yet again just a reiteration. Benjamin Netanyahu himself goes to the United Nations. It's been since he's been in political power in Israel. At the United Nations, he's been talking about Iran having nuclear weapons, when they're not, they don't at all, but they have the uranium capabilities of making a power, but not to use as weapons. And this is their strategy, always going to the international body, like it was with Bush and Colin Powell against Saddam Hussein, and the same thing with Libya with Muammar Gaddafi. You're on mute.
Hello, Nicholas. Nice to meet you.
Hey, how you doing?
Today? Good. I wanted before we continue on that thought, I wanted to can you introduce your organization? I apologize. We should have did that
That's right.
first.
Yeah. Well, I can start off with that. So Los Renderos Las Redes is a U.S.-based Peruvian collective. So I'm based in Southern California. Nicolas is based in San Francisco. Hugo is now in Puerto Rico. He's been studying there for a few years already. But previously, he's been organizing with other Peruvians in the DMV area, the Washington, D.C. mainly. But yeah, he's I've been doing a lot, Nicholas as well. And we've got other members as well based in New York City and Florida.
Thank you. Yeah, guys, please. I'm going to make sure the link is in the description if I didn't put it already. But no, actually I did on social media. So definitely check it out. I'm going to make sure the link is in the description on YouTube. I don't know if I did that yet, but I apologize if I did. I'll make sure I fix that. Yeah, I mean, real quick, I will say about Iran. I definitely agree with you. And you see now that they're definitely using this as a distraction to try to get the world to have some sympathy for Israel now, because they realize, with Hamas that they're not winning the narrative, and they're looking very, very like who they really are as a settler state. So it's very, very important that people try to stay focused on the matter. And we as progressives and socialists, it's our job to remind people 24/7, because the media is going to try and demonize Iran and bring back the boogeyman just so Israel could look better face.
So they've changed their narrative. First, they were, saying that this was a mistake for Israel doing this attack on April 1st. And now Israel has, taken too much, bombing Lebanon, in Gaza and Syria, and now they've just attacked Syria's Damascus in the Iranian consulate there, killing top Iranian officials and some Syrian officials as well. And so now Iran is putting Israel at check, and this is a positive thing. People, of course, are worried about this confrontation turning into a World War III scenario, but other experts, analysts would say that we're already at that phase, and we've already been dangerously close to nuclear war, further than it is now. It has been during the Cold War period, when that was a bipolar world, and now we're transitioning out of a unipolar world from the War on Terror era, and having a multipolar world rising, and it is kind of destructive. It has to be, because the older powers, the Western powers, that don't want to relinquish their what the word again? I forgot. But essentially, they just don't want to give up their power at all. Yeah. And people inside their countries, like the United Kingdom, the United States, even Canada, they come from all around the world. They're immigrants, they're Palestinians, they're Peruvians, and so forth. They are fighting the same fight for the collective liberation for all.
Yeah, definitely. I think we got a packed show, so let's definitely get right into it. For everybody that's listening, please like, share, subscribe. Let everyone know that we're live right now. Spread the word. Let's have a conversation. Just like last time when there was comments that had questions, I would definitely put those questions onto the stream as well too, so my panel can answer those questions as well. So people are welcome to ask questions as well. So let's start off with Peru. Since you mentioned Peru first, and then we can go on to Ecuador right after. So in Peru right now, there is a regime that is funded by the CIA. This was off of Comrade O'Brien research. Is she in Peru now, or is she still fundraising to go back?
We believe that she's back in New Jersey. Yeah, she took a recent trip to Peru. I think we also had the deer. You've had him on the show before. He was much more recently there back in March.
Oh, I got to get him back. Okay. Yeah. So, very, very important. There's a DINA. There's a DINA regime there, and like I said, CIA backed. It's a similar situation like Ukraine, where our tax dollars is funding, basically their police force and paying for whatever expenses they need to keep this regime going. What are some updates that we can talk about for people in the United States, our audience here, to understand more on what's happening in the situation with Peru? Oh, sorry. Anyone can talk. I apologize.
Well, I guess the first thing I could do is, like, for those who didn't know the background, I guess it's really interesting too, like the way it got set up. There's been like a constant struggle between what it is the legislative brand and the executive brand for the past decade and a half or so. The legislative brand tends to always have a more extremist right-wing members in the Congress, and whereas the executive branch tends to either have a more centrist or in the case of Castillo, at times even a center-left person in the administration. And basically what had been happening in the past two administrations was that the legislative, who were the losers of both the elections, they wanted to be the ones who were the ones who governed, and that wasn't the case. And in this latest one with Castillo, who was elected president, it was even worse for them because Castillo is a person who represented everything that they aren't. It would be as if, like in the U.S., a person who doesn't come from the centers of power. So, for example, the mass media, let's say the military industrial complex, the big pharma, all those things, were to compete against someone who comes from that background and beat them in a popular vote. That is basically what happened in Peru. Like 3 years ago or so. Castillo, the anti-Fujimori, which is the previous dictator there from the 90s, the sentiment against his regime and their candidacy, which was his daughter, was greater than the anti-leftist sentiment that there has been in Peru. And so the candidate who won this time wasn't just someone who was, unlike previous years, who was like a centrist who beat them, but it was actually someone who came from everything that they despise, everything that is opposite from them. It was the big mining sector, the big media sector, the banks, all the international business interests. All of them saw themselves being beaten by a nobody. And so when that occurred, from the very first day, they tried to undermine his presidency by saying first that he wasn't a legitimate, he didn't win the election legitimately. Then they said that he was too extreme. Then they said that no, they got other people when he tilted a bit more to the center. No, he was a traitor now. So there was always something wrong. Now it is true that he did make a lot of errors. He did lack a lot of competence in the execution of a lot of his policies, but again, that still doesn't change a lot of the stuff that they had been trying to do from the beginning, which was take him out. Now, what happens in December of 2022, and it's very interesting because a lot of the people in those elite circles were trying to publish a book saying, how to get rid of a president without actually, get rid of him, which was basically what happened is that there was a conglomerate of lawyers who came either very affiliated with banks and also, party interests from the Fujimoristas, and unfortunately, also from El APRA, who were negotiating with the current tyrant of the country, because that's how she runs the country, like a tyrant, Dina Boluarte. Dina Boluarte is someone who was a personal friend of Castillo, who unfortunately has a questionable background when it comes to her personal finances. A lot of the stuff in her CV that has been, kind of iffy and faked. And so they kind of pulled up kind of what the CIA does on people here to politicians. They say that they did this to Bernie Sanders too. They pull up something that's wrong with you in your past, and they're like, okay, look, this is what's wrong here. You can be in big trouble. So this is what we can do. You can go ahead. We will clear you. You stay with us. You betray Castillo, and we already have something set up in which Castillo is basically going to immolate himself. So their strategy was we're gonna get Castillo to since one of the reasons why Castillo was also taken out is because there was hundreds of mining projects that under his presidency were not given a green light. And in Peru, the mining industry, both illegal mining and also the formal legal mining with the multinationals is there's a lot of business and a lot of international, even geopolitical stuff that is moved there. And so the fact that you have someone here who doesn't give the green light for that to happen is a big deal. So then what occurs is, and it was around that time when Tony Blinken goes to Peru and meets with Castillo, meets with the embassy. There's also a reshuffling of a cabinet in which the new defense minister, Bobbio, meets with the ambassador to Peru, Lisa Ken. And fast forward a week or so, this whole thing happens. What had happened is that they had promised Castillo, the new heads of the military, they were like, okay, like we understand that there's this problem between you and the legislative. They're not letting you travel because Castillo wanted to travel, in previous months to go to Gustavo Petro's inauguration as president. They're not letting you travel. They're not approving a lot of your legislations, a lot of your economic packages, and worst of all, it's like they're not letting anything of your. They also had some troubles there, accusing his family of his own daughters and wives of corruption, of stuff like that. That now apparently it's all in the air. We don't know what's happened. It's interesting because while he was president, it was a big deal. Now it's just like all erased all of a sudden, like it never happened. Like it was a big ruse. So they were like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. You can close down the Congress and the military. We're going to give you backing. Okay, that's what you're gonna do. And Castillo's like, okay, I'm gonna do that then. So Castillo goes in there, closes the Congress, and he puts this country in a state of emergency. And then what occurs, though, unfortunately, is that the head of the military, who had talked to him, retires. And so he loses a big chunk of, unlike what Fujimori had when he did the same thing. When Fujimori closed down the Congress, he had the backing of the police and the military. So even though a lot of the Congress was against him, and a lot of some of the population was against him, he still had enough popular support and also the military and the police support to carry out his plans. Unfortunately, Castillo, he had a split nation, and the population of how they viewed him, and lacked the muscle. So then, really easily, they bring in Dina Boluarte, and they enact their plan that they wanted from the very beginning, and they got rid of him. And now with Dina in power, basically what they did is, you've all heard, of all the mass protests and all the extrajudicial killings, but give a green light to a lot of the extraction that they wanted to be done. When it comes to our natural resources, a lot of the, for example, putting in trial a lot of the new judges. They're called the magistrates, who are basically like the equivalent of the Supreme Court in Peru, to try to remove some of them and try to put new ones, which is some of the reforms that have been done in previous years under former President Vizcarra, who got rid of a lot of the previous judges who were from the Fujimori era and a lot of the corruption there. So they're basically now also trying to do an election reform as well. I'm not really sure what is it that they're trying to accomplish with this, but they also said that we need to make sure that now we're going to have cleaner elections. So for the coming up
And that
elections,
this is what's happening right now. They're trying to put on a fake.
So in like 2 months ago or so, more like a month ago, they got rid of a few judges. They were inhabilitating, I think that's the word, for some of the judges, and now they're also trying to present new laws when it comes to the things of elections and stuff like that. Ironically though, and this is something that we see when you're a tool of the empire or of any empire really, is that they don't really like you, they don't love you, they don't have affection for you. So then what happens, and this was happening to Dina Boluarte, it's like she was just a tool, because now there's just things coming out of her her banking accounts. And for example, there's this big deal done with her Rolex watches, where it's like, why does she have all these Rolex watches? And the media is making a huge deal out of it. It's like, why was she getting these donations of expensive Rolex watches? And even some groups in Congress are like, we're going to have a trial of her and maybe get rid of her. And some people are saying, well, so last year when there was all the killings and all the extrajudicial detentions, it wasn't a big deal. But now that there's a scandal of the Rolex and all the accounts and stuff like that, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we gotta investigate these things. So it always happens. They use you, and then they throw you away. I mean, I think another example we have seen with this recently in Honduras with Juan Orlando Hernandez. They were like, all of a sudden it's like, man, this guy was a drug trafficker, we're gonna put him in prison. Like, the attorney representing the United States is like, this man was dealing cocaine from the past, since the 2011 with his brother. Did you not know? We have evidence here that you didn't know. It would have been interesting. And I also saw this, someone who commented in an article I was reading. It's like, if Hernandez, who is a former president, very dictatorial, dirty president of Honduras, who has recently been condemned of drug trafficking. It would have been interesting if Hernandez was also the one asking the questions to the U.S. Representatives, the legal representatives of the U.S. Maybe it would have been interesting to have him ask, do you guys know that I was, how did you guys work in all this? Because, we were buddies, so what's going on? So, yeah, like it's another example will be like Noriega also in Panama, same thing. And unfortunately, in that case, we won't even know, because when Bush invaded Panama, they took a lot of records when it came to Noriega and when it took the murder of Torrijos as well. So, yeah, I guess that's a little bit, if anyone else wants to hop in.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, 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 thank you so much for bringing an update on the history, because it is very, very important to remind people exactly how did we get here. And it's very, very telling how just 24/7. I remember when I had Jajir on, and he mentioned that they all go to jail in Peru. They all they get their money, and then they try to run. Like it's just a thing that keeps going on 24/7, and a lot of it's because of the U.S. Like they get everything they need, and then they try to bounce. and that's why I thought this was going to be a very short. I was assuming it was going to be a short regime, but while it kept going on, I started getting worried. I'm just like, God, man, these people don't deserve this. Why does this keep happening? I'm sorry, Paolo, go ahead. And if Hugo, you can chime in too. You've been so quiet. Just listening.
It's been very much like Manuel Noriega or Volodymyr Zelensky, and that's what Javier Milei or Daniel Noboa will become. They think that that's allying with the U.S. Very closely, having the FBI and U.S. Southcom, the DEA operating in their country or opening up a new U.S. base in Patagonia is going to be good for their friendship with the U.S. It's really an abusive relationship that they don't really know, and the people reject it too. The people despise this libertarian government, and that is allying with Israel, a genocidal dictatorship itself as well. The prime minister has been there for a long time, and he's been Benjamin Netanyahu knows that if he ends his reign, if he leaves, then it's all over. Or that for Daniel Noboa, for Israel's case in Ecuador, they tried to recruit about like 23,000 Ecuadorians to move over there. That's what they're doing with the Indians too, and Indians are actually more reluctant. Well, not reluctant. The opposite. More willing to go work over there, since they've kicked out the Palestinians. That's a working force in Israel, in occupied Palestine. So they, Ecuador has similar problems with Peru in terms of the logging, mining, the petrol, multinational corporations, the extractivism. There's one major Canadian mining corporation that is getting its hands dirty, of course, with trying to extract the oil in the Amazon. And so the indigenous Ecuadorians have been stopping this, trying to stop this over there. And Ecuador's president, Daniel Noboa, is breaking his promises, including on before he got elected, the vote of the Yasunami, or Yasuni rather, referendum to stop oil projects, new oil projects, and to end the conflicts there. But yeah, in Peru, Peru is dealing with that as well. Different presidents, but very the same style of neoliberalism, with logging interests, illegal mining. The indigenous territories over there have been succumbed to, or they're succumbed to and suffering under the illegal mining, drug trafficking that's passing through these regions. Yeah. And so the people there, indigenous Peruvians, feel that the government has neglected them, and have put them in a deadly situation. The assassinations of indigenous leaders have been quite often so in these regions, and it used to be more so in Brazil when Jair Bolsonaro was in power. And these are the type of fascistic, white supremacist people that want to take the land of the indigenous people, just like we're seeing with in Palestine.
Yeah, yeah. I have a question here for whoever wants to answer.
We should let Hugo talk. Yeah.
What's up?
We should let Hugo talk. He's been
really
quiet. I know he wants to
He's taking notes. I see the pen clicking. So, what are the popular resources from Peru that the U.S. Imperialism have control over?
Well, Nicolas definitely can list them out. I know he's got that at the top of his head, but one thing that I did want to try to mention was something that you actually mentioned at the beginning, the international aspect, and where, you know, the importance, you know, looking at it from like the U.S., you know, or taxpayers are going into these projects. So in whether we're talking about Peru, Argentina, Ecuador, Mexico, and even in the Middle East, we were discussing earlier about Iran, and obviously people have been mobilizing right now, and you know they're against the occupation, all the money that's being sent over there, and some that, you know, obviously we're seeing the propaganda about what you mentioned earlier. And I don't know if this is something that you guys have been getting, but the last couple of days I've been getting a little bit on my feed, a little resurgence of the propaganda, or well, a little bit of the contradictions that exist in Iran from the past Iran democracy movements. So I really like that, the focus that you kind of bring to it. There's going to be a lot of different distractions that are going to be thrown our way, but at the end of the day, it's what they're taking from us into these different imperialist projects.
Right.
And even in Peru, one of the main reasons that all of this crisis came about was how Nicolas mentioned earlier, the contracts that were expiring. They couldn't let Pedro Castillo dictate the better conditions for the people in Peru. So imperialism does play a big role in all these situations globally.
Yeah, it definitely does. I wanted to also mention that, like, it's very, very important. Like piggyback off of Hugo says, that they, like, people mention 24/7. Just to say real quickly that no one's watching mainstream media, mainstream news and all that stuff like that. But people are. It's at your job, it's in the airport, it's everywhere. So a lot of people are going to like look for a second and just be like, oh wow, that's crazy, and that's it. That's all they'll ever know. And it's just that one part can misguide our working class people. That one freaking part. It's on the local news too, and people go on the local news, and I'm always wondering, why is local news covering overseas shit? And like, it's really that ingrained that even the local news bring it up 24/7. So that's why I definitely do the due diligence the best way I can. I know that I'm just a small person, but whoever talks to me, they know damn well I'm like, hey, no, focus. Let's look. What's the need?
It was definitely like that as well when it came to a couple years ago. I remember, in 2022, both of them happened when it came to Ukraine and when it came to Iran. With the flag that is the lion that resembles the old previous leadership under Iran, and these two I've seen them before in wealthier communities that both the Ukrainian flag and the older Iranian flag flown together at protest. These actions back then, these mobilizations were promoting the Ukrainian side and the anti-Iranian side, but with the Iranian diaspora that's actually here in Los Angeles or Southern California. We've got one of the largest populations of Iranians outside of over there in Iran. So we have lots of people that think that way of Masa Amini, and believe in the propaganda. I believe in CIA operatives, people who are Iranians that say that they're activists, but they've done more so than activism. They've done manipulating the politics. They've manipulated the stories of Masa Amini, of how she really died, and how this was how they worked in partnership with Mike Pompeo himself, even. So it goes all the way up there. And this is, of course, the grand conspiracy. But this is how the other side. It's not just the Republican side, but the Democrats. The Democrats are quick to mobilize around anti-Iran or Ukraine when this whole special military operation or the Iran affair happened. Yeah, and so we have to be the same. We have to be there for Cuba when there are the lies spreading out about Cuba when it comes to Nicaragua and Venezuela as well. These attacks from the mainstream media, these controlled oppositions in the grassroots level are there as well, and that we have to counteract. So
I definitely want. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to get to your question there. So the resources, the natural resources about for Peru, they have gotten uranium, and Peru declared that a while back that they are never going to use that for nuclear weapons. just like Iran, they wanted to be peaceful, but Iran has the power to fight back because they're one of the superpowers in the region there. But Peru is not in that type of capabilities. They got Russian Soviet era weapons, actually, just like in Ecuador. Actually, Ecuador's tried to, Ukraine actually tried to make a deal with Ecuador with the U.S. As the middleman to send to Ukraine Soviet old weapons to use in Ukraine's battle, which they are basically losing over there at that front. But yeah, Ecuador backed out already. Other minerals or resources, of course, Peru is wealthy in, of course, gold still, even though Spain took quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's I just you can just imagine Peru is like California. California has the gold rush, very wealthy up in NorCal. But yeah, it's so similar being on the Pacific side of the ocean, having multiple climates. But yeah, copper is a big one. I think tin, petroleum, oil.
Also, let's not. So there's copper, definitely gold. Gold is actually one of the ones that helped us in the 2008 crisis when people were saving especially the big money, saving their money in gold bars instead of the US dollar to help the Peruvian economy.
I was just going to ask that. Yep.
Also, yeah, silver. But then there's also another one, and it's one that we share with Bolivia. Bolivia has even bigger reserves of it in Argentina, which is lithium. And there's also been talk of, especially, the southern region of Peru and Puno, which is the border that we share with Bolivia, of how we're going to, in the next few years and probably the next administration and a lot of the people who will be running for the presidency in the coming years, they will be debating on how exactly, we will use those reserves of lithium, because Bolivia has the biggest reserves of lithium. And in the border with Peru, in Puno, there's also a lot of it in that region as well that it remains, largely untapped. And whoever gets there first and whoever is in power, well, they will have definitely a lot of control, and it will definitely, we'll see how also that plays out geopolitically, because there will be the Chinese who will try to get a take out of it. The U.S. will try to get a take of it. Maybe Russia, all the ones who they will try to come in and negotiate or impose whatever it is to see how they can deal with, the lithium reserves. And just also real quick, on what you guys were talking about Iran. If you go on YouTube and you can find this, is like you look at Wesley Clark. He talks about the project of the 21st century, the New American Century, and Wesley Clark. He is a former saying is a U.S. Army general. He was actually also head of NATO, and he talks about how when he was in the military, there was this one of the big plans was to take out 7 countries. Now that the Cold War was over, the U.S. had defeated the USSR. There was the talk about let's topple all the regimes, to spread democracy, spread American hegemony in the world, Western hegemony in the world. And who were the hostile nations? Well, Libya, Iraq, Syria. Who else was the other one? Oh, Iran was one of the other ones. So Iran has always been Somalia, Iran, Yemen. And if you look at it also, you look at the Arab Spring and a lot of the wars, especially Obama's, Bush, and then Obama's, all the 7 wars. They're basically all those countries, and Iran especially is one of the big ones, because you're talking about a nation that has also a lot of power when it comes to not just their you guys were mentioning the nuclear race and all that, but also their oil and their position, their strategic position in the world map, and also the fact that it's a country with a large history, a large population. If you're able to topple, Iran, you are taking a huge chunk of the Middle East and the eastern part of the planet. So that is also a big deal, and it's all a big chessboard. And if you look at Ecuador and you look, you guys were talking, mentioning Argentina also, and Peru. And Ecuador as well. The current president, he's and the same thing with Milei. I wouldn't say that Milei or Novoa are popular. They actually have large numbers of popularity, mostly also because there's the media definitely played a role in it, but also because there was a lot of mistakes that were done by the previous governments. And I think one of the things that we need to ask ourselves, in the past two Ecuadorian elections, is why is it that the leftist movement or the Correísmo has such a interesting 35, and then in the second round 45% electoral ceiling. I think that is one of the self-critiques that we got to look at, because if you look at the 2021 and the 2023 Ecuadorian elections, the numbers that the Correísmo gets are pretty much identical, both in the first round and in the second round, in the legislative and the presidential. So I don't know if that's because maybe they need someone like Correa, who is the former president, who's exiled in Belgium, to actually just push them past the finish line. Sometimes that is true. People just like to vote for the person, or there is a legit, concern of, and self-critique that needs to be done, and say, why is it that we lost in those 10 years such a 15% of the electorate? And the thing with Novoa is that he has a referendum coming up in a few weeks, actually. And he's going to try to modify a lot of things, and one of those things has to do with arbitration, with international arbitration, whether the Ecuadorian government can sue multinationals, whether foreign or national, multinationals, transnational corporations, and whether the country is actually can get reparations for or whatever, if let's say a company missed their taxes or caused some damage, whether the Ecuadorian government has the legitimacy to take that company to court. And so the problem with that question is that actually Novoa's, who, let's not forget, he's the son of the richest man in Ecuador, who also ran for president, successful multiple times. Novoa has a lot of companies right now currently in litigation with the Ecuadorian government because of tax payments and all that. So if he wins that question, he's basically going to be able to be in control of the arbitration between his own companies and the state itself. So that is a big deal as well. And Novoa is someone who obviously came in as a young gun, with a very seductive message. It looks good, he talks good, and
right.
well, we gotta also see how that plays out. And he actually has caused, in closing it with the geopolitical part, Laura Richardson, he brought the U.S. Southern Hemisphere Command into Ecuadorian ground, actually has opened U.S. bases now in Ecuadorian territory. And interestingly enough, the U.S. Hemisphere Command, Laura Richardson herself, said before all these things happen, it's like, we need to get back on track in Latin America, because it's a rich region with a lot of resources, also position in the map, also how different world powers like to interfere and see where they could take it. So it's all a big chessboard, and we not just see it play in the Middle East, but also in Latin America. And with these governments, we're seeing that played out in current times.
Yeah, I look, I'm glad that you mentioned Ecuador, because let's get into Ecuador. There's just so much, as what you just talked about, and in the media they talk about the violence there now, and they talk about how it was not as violent before, and it's just gotten so much worse all of a sudden, and then then you move down into Mexico with the whole embassy being raided. What are you guys? I want to show this real quick because AMLO, for people that don't that don't know, maybe you do know. I'm pretty sure people that are watching this already know. AMLO is instituting proceedings against Ecuador and requests the court to indicate provisional measures. It was they went in there and they kidnapped the former president, whose name was Jorge Glass, right?
Vice president.
Vice president.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why? I mean, first of all, that goes against the sovereignty of Mexico. That's a big problem. Just like with the consulate getting attacked by Israel, like we're just gonna go into people's embassies and do whatever we want now. Like it's open season. But is there any reason? Is there like, because I'm someone who is not well. I just learned a lot about Ecuador just now. So, like, I understand that Korea was also prosecuted before and pursued. And I heard an interview with his vice president as well too, on Breakthrough News. What are they pursuing for Jorge Glass? Is he okay, or is it unknown of his well-being?
I know.
I just asked like two questions. I'm sorry.
I guess to talk about Jorge Glass, he actually, during his arrest, he's definitely not okay. I think they broke his ribs. His left thumb was broken. So it was definitely very, very vicious. And that's actually one of the reasons why Mexico is seeking reparations as well as an expulsion of Ecuador from the United Nations, a temporary expulsion. And currently Jorge Glass is in prison where he's underway of a hunger strike. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, uh-oh. I think we just lost her.
I could finish where he left off on this. So Jorge Glass, he is under a lawfare situation, just like other former leaders in Latin America. And so he tried to flee to Mexico, Mexico being the most historically known for its high amount of political refugees seeking asylum. Pedro Castillo's family, the first family, is over there living there in exile right now. So Jorge Glass was seeking refuge there, but the Ecuadorian authorities, due to Noboa's type of governmental style, he is a tough on crime figure, where he wants to look tough because he is battling this internal armed conflict against the organized crime. So he went to breach international law, the Vienna Convention, ripped up just to get Jorge Glass on the corruption scandal. But he already served for 5 years already, and that's why he was trying to flee. But yeah, so he's been captured. A few days after he was captured, he was taken to 2 military hospitals, and apparently he was attempting suicide. And so he's really not well at this time. And the Revolución Ciudadana, Korea's party, is very concerned of his safety, of his well-being, and they're putting everything on the government as responsible for his health.
So what's happening is that remember how I mentioned earlier that there's going to be a referendum, an election referendum that the current president has put forth. So he like like Paolo was talking about his stance of being tough on crime. He also wants to show that he's also tough on white collar crime, on not just the streets gangs, but also the corruption of the highest spheres. And it's all a part of this ruse. The thing with Glass is that he was been accused from quite almost a decade now of if y'all remember the Lavajato, the car wash case, with Odebrecht and Petrobras, which is in the case of Ecuador. The specifically
Yeah,
what he's being
I
accused
remember
of.
that.
Um, yeah, so what there was a Brazilian construction company who was paying bribes across the world to different politicians and such, to favor them in the construction of different public works. And so Glass has been accused ever since to being kind of the top head in the Correa years of executing and also receiving the bribes, of being the one who kind of made the money flow. If you wanted to have a public work being built for you, you talk to him, and then he'll get you set up. So that's what Glass was being accused of.
Mm.
So he was when Correa ended his term after 10 years, and he decided not to run again. Lenin Moreno was the one who was his vice president. Lenin Moreno. So Correa had two vice presidents. He had Lenin Moreno and then Jorge Glass. So Lenin
Okay.
Moreno was the presidential candidate, and Glass was going to be the VP ticket. And so then what happens is that when Moreno wins, after 6 months or so, Moreno flips. He decides to, do a whole 180 and turn into a right-wing neoliberal president. And one of the first things he does is he strips Glass of his, vice presidency, strips him of his immunity, and puts him in jail. So basically, then Glass stays in there for a long time. And like you guys mentioned, he has been there for 5 years now, because eventually they couldn't they took him out because they couldn't really prove some of the other things that they were accusing him of, and also because of like his health was deteriorating and such. And so Glass was released, but he was still had some charges that were still under investigation. In the case of Correa, um, he has been accused of a lot of things. We can't There's a lot of things that can't really be proved, but he does have two convictions actually. His convictions, trial in absentia. But the problem is that both of them lack procedural, legitimacy. The first one is for a kidnapping, and the
Mm.
kidnapping, what he's been accused is that there is this journalist who got kidnapped by government officials, a government police force that he hired in inside of Colombia. That this journalist have flew to Colombia, and then that he sent police people. He paid police members to get him from there, kidnap him, because that journalist allegedly had proof of Correa's corruption. The problem with that case, and that is one of the reasons why now that's called Balda, Fernando Balda. That's the name of the journalist. The Balda case. The problem with that case is that, first of all, they they said that, okay, here's the reasons, but then they couldn't find any trace from Correa talking to those police people about it. So it's like, okay, so where's the call trace? It's like, oh, we're using telephones that are non rechargeable telephones, so we can't track the phone call, so we can't do that. And then also a few years
Sorry.
ago as well, and that's the thing too, is that you were seeing a similar case as what happened with Lula da Silva, which were
Right.
basically the prosecutors working alongside of the judges,
Right.
in this whole thing. And also, one of the people who was one of the witnesses, one of the kidnappers to this journalist, eventually came out about like last year or so, saying that, yeah, like, I was actually set up, like, Correa never paid me or none of this. I was just set up. I was paid to accuse him of that he had paid me to go and kidnap this guy. And then the second one is called Arroz Verde. which is basically that, Correa had, this huge system in which him and all of his, ministers and people in his executive, branch, they all basically had a system of bribes and, of how they, had different, spreadsheets of how they were paying each other different dollars and different revenues, of the government funds. The problem with that case is that is similar to the Christina Kirchner case with the notebooks, but this one is even crazier, because what it says is that the limousine, not the limousine, or the personal driver of the president and of a lot of the president's co-workers was basically taking down notes of everything that every transaction and with all their names and everything in huge detail that was going on. The thing is that, is it really possible for one guy to write years of information? We're talking about like almost half a decade of information in just one notebook with almost the same ink, in a notebook that said that was purchased in 2018, which is a year later that Correa had left office. And that's the thing, is that he also has a conviction for that case as well. And so Correa is like, well, I'm not gonna, like, if I go to Ecuador, they're gonna put me in prison like they have done with Glass. So I'm gonna go to Belgium, because in Belgium, they're not going to extradite me. And actually, he during the Lenin Moreno years, Glass, or not Glass, Lasso, the last president, he didn't really go along with this whole, lawfare thing. It seems like Novoa is trying to restart it again, but during the Lenin Moreno years, it was really prevalent. But Correa had a lot of in Interpol requests by the Ecuadorian government at that time were denied, because Interpol said the proceedings and the way these convictions have been made just do not follow, the way that a courtroom system should function.
Right.
Yeah, that's for your question of why the case of Glass and Correa, that is kind of a bit of the background on that.
I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one that's like, what the hell, out of the audience. That's absolutely just crazy. So what is the motive for the current regime of Ecuador? Why is this so important for them? To go after Jorge Glass, Correa. What is is there a motive, or are they trying to, like, just want to just destroy their reputation? Is it really that important to them? I don't understand.
It's more than destroying the reputation. It's to stop them from getting back into politics. Just like with Brazil, Lula da Silva, he was able to make a comeback miraculously back into power after Bolsonaro, after the U.S.-backed coup that had the CIA and FBI involved in the Lava Jato case that was later found bogus. So then, for in Ecuador's case, this partnership with the U.S. is very close because of Noboa's family history. They are a wealthy family, and Noboa owns a very profitable banana farm. So you can look at it as a banana republic. But he was born in Miami, Florida. His family, he made sure that each of his children were born in Florida instead of in Ecuador. So they have much more privileges to be a U.S.-born citizen. It's just like Keiko Fujimori or others, right-wing figures. They study abroad. They study in the United States, in the private schools or Ivy League schools as well. So they then they come back and institute neoliberal policies of austerity and extractivism. They make a profit off of this, being the puppet leadership here.
Yeah. That's so interesting. You know, even Juan Guaido as well too. Like they all, when you look at their ties, they always seem to be here at 24/7. And it brings me to like how people always ask, why do you always think it's the US when it comes to Latin America? Like people hate like mentioning the US when it comes to Latin America because it's a racist mindset, just like with the Middle East. They just assume that, you know, Latin America could never get their shit together, just like the Middle East damn straight could never get their shit together. Like they just
They just neglect all of the recent history,
right.
the war on terror, but not just that, but at least 200 years of the Monroe Doctrine back in 2023 just completed 200 years of that President Monroe just invading in Central America and South America, the Caribbean. This version of a manifest destiny, even for example, in Nicaragua, having the William Walker, this U.S. This American coming to Nicaragua to take the land and proclaim that slavery will be reinstated in the country, making himself as president. And this was way before our time, but it was like during the gold rush era, actually, before the Panama Canal was built. So they were, you know, it's just like today's time that they have these type of figures, that these puppet leaders.
Well, I wouldn't say it's like it's not just.
I'm gonna turn on my air conditioner real quick. So keep going.
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm just going to turn my air conditioner on.
No, I wouldn't say it's like just necessarily the U.S. It's more of like, you know, whoever is the big power, you know, at that time in the world. Like for example, during the War of Independence in Latin America, you know, the big power, the big, you know, sucker of life in our continent was the British, and you know, it was between the Spanish and the British who were, you know, seeing who would prevalence, you know, between them two. And you know, I think one of the things you should always look at, regardless of whatever the country is and whatever is the big imperial power, is just follow the track of the money. You know, where does the money go? Where is the wealth going? Because in our countries, especially since the time of their independence, you know, there were aristocracies, there were, you know, oligarchies that were formed because, you know, of resources. You know, in the case of, for example, Peru, you know, the minerals, also the ports, you know, all the fishing industries, the sales, all that. In Argentina, for example, you know, there's the big, you know, landowners are the ones who own the, you know, that have to do with the cattle farms and all that stuff, you know. So you always got to follow where the money's concentrated, because then whoever those elites are, they're also going to want to expand their wealth and influence. And who do they deal with? They deal with whoever can be the big power at that time in the world, who can offer them that level of expansion. At times it was the Spanish, or even though the Spanish were more of the decline, really it was more the British. You know, the British was at a time, you know, a lot of, you know, had a lot of business, and we had a huge debt. Peru had a huge debt with the British. You know, Venezuelans also had a big trouble, you know, with the British Empire at that point, at that time. Then, you know, it became also times the French, and you know, recently, since, you know, the second half of the, or not the second half, but I say the 1930s, 1940s has been the United States. So that is why there is that, you know, I guess, anti-American sentiment, if you want to call it. But what it really is simply, you know, the big nation, and having a relationship with the big elites of our, you know, smaller or so nations, because, you know, they try to always, you know, expand, you know, their wealth, expand their influence. And that is just simply how it has been, you know, in throughout history. You know, you want to look at the Romans, you want to look at, you know, there's been for better or for worse, different empires. But there's always the conquered nations, having their elites deal with the conquerors, who are the big imperial nations, for their their power, their control, and their resources. But
Yeah. I mean, it's just off of how crazy the British were. They were actually freeing slaves and then forcing them into contracts on plantations that they bought around the Caribbean, Latin America, and saying, "Oh yeah, you're free, but you have to work here for several years." Like you're a slave labor
yeah,
all over.
the Belgians did that. The Belgians did similar thing in
Yeah.
the Congo. In the Congo, King Leopold, used to claim that, oh, right here, we're a free territory from slavery. But then what was he really doing? He was basically abusing, a lot of the natives in the Congo, to basically serve him as his resource of, different different things so that he could, build up his wealth in Belgium. So,
Right.
there's always that stuff.
That's always the case.
And not only that, but the British are historically known to pay reparations, but to whom? To the slave owners, not the previous slaves. This is also another thing is that in Guyana, a neighbor to Venezuela, they took Essequibo away when Simon Bolivar was alive back then. And now they've been dealing with this at the ICJ, and after their case, President Maduro has declared that they are reaffirming that Essequibo is historically been a part of Venezuela, and it will remain as such, even though the International Court of Justice have ruled otherwise.
Yeah, let's talk about Venezuela. I think it's a good part to get into, because they are also in the news right now being ridiculed, as we already mentioned, for their elections. And then you got the president of Guyana, who I like to call the lapdog of the British Empire. He's one of their final lapdogs. It's just there's some people from Guyana that, if you guys are listening, I'm sorry that you feel different, because I had some conversations with some friends from Guyana, and they are more on President Ali's side. And I was like, well, what about the border struggle of how the British created those borders and took land from Venezuela and stuff like that? No, they didn't want to hear that part. They didn't want to hear that part. So there's two narratives with that. First, before we go to the election part, there's two narratives that I'm hearing. The narrative is that Maduro is just going to send in his troops anytime, and there's going to be a bloodbath over Guyana. And then I'm also in the true narrative is what we already know, is that Maduro is not going to do that, but we could see that from the other side. We could see that from the British. What British ships literally were there in intimidation. What is there any updates on that type of land dispute currently right now? Oh, whoever wanted to go.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to apologize. My device overheated, so that's why I got hopped out. But yeah, no, in Venezuela, I know they have the elections coming up. I believe it's going to be on Hugo Chavez's birthday, so July 28th. I know that the deadline to register to vote was already last week, and a big conversation in Venezuela was regarding the agreements that Caracas had with the White House. One of them actually was upheld last week, which was different delegates from the European Union and around the world coming in to observe the elections. And I know that on the White House end, one thing that hasn't been agreed, which was part of the talks, was the lifting of all the sanctions, which included 9 different discussions that the White House had with Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
I let one of the comrades talk about the Guyana affair?
So CENTCOM, the other part of Southcom, Laura Richardson is going back and forth here, trying to stir trouble in Central America, South America, the Caribbean, everywhere, and that's why there's this relationship building up. Since this started, this feud started in December again, between the border of Essequibo. So I think things are calming down since then. But of course, as you said, these two Western powers are wanting to stir the trouble, just like in China, just like with Iran. Well, China in terms of this with over Taiwan, even though everywhere around the world it recognizes that Taiwan is a part of China, including the United States, but they do not follow their own agenda, their policies that they've proclaimed to say years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely they want us to more mess here, but Venezuela and the people want peace, and they want to. They agreed to reaffirm that Essequibo is a part of Venezuela, and I believe that they are going to re-elect Nicolas Maduro. They are leading a party that Chavistas are still going to succeed in this upcoming election in July. And as Hugo said, it's actually on the same day as the Independence Day of Peru. And so not only Hugo holds a birthday there, but actually dictator Alberto Fujimori does too. It's all a political coincidence here. But yesterday was one of our big important figures in Peru, Jose Carlos Mariátegui's day when he was transitioned into immortality. His legacy is of Mariáteguismo, coming back from Italy to bring the Marxism to South America, and not just in Peru. And yeah. Nico, do you want to finish up?
I think you guys know a bit more on that part of information though. But I was just remembering one thing that Jamar was asking about why is it that all these figures get such a persecution from their rival, their enemy politicians. And I think it has to do, a lot also with, you mentioned Lula and about how, he was very successful president actually, in his results and also in his popularity, and how he was imprisoned. Whether he was actually guilty or not, we'll never know, because the whole process was just a huge sham. And well, the thing also though is that he did, and it's something very interesting. For example, in the case of Brazil, and it's something how I was talking earlier about the oligarchs and the people in power. Glenn Greenwald, who's famous journalist, he was talking about how in Brazil there's a few families who also control media and stuff like that, the politics and all that, and they didn't like a lot of the policies that Lula succeeded on. And so they felt that, okay, if we imprison him, maybe we can finally have our guy, win. And ideally for them, Glenn Green will explain, ideally for them, a president would be in the lines of, Mitch McConnell, kind of that type of political line. But then what happened was that instead, the guy who filled up that void left by Lula was someone, on the further, authoritarian right. So then, when later on they were like confronted of the decision, okay, next election is like if Bolsonaro if he runs again and it's anybody who opposes him, Bolsonaro is going to prevail. He's going to win. But if we, talk to these judges and get him, released, Lula is the one who runs. Well, for us, he is the lesser of two evils, for the Brazilian elites. And so they eventually were, one of the judges there, dictated that, Lula's whole conviction was, fraudulent, which it really was. And from the very beginning, and, because, the judge, like in all these processes, the judges and the prosecution had, kind of interacted together, discussed this, something that should never happen. And so Lula was able to run again, beat Bolsonaro. And, these elites are kind of like, well, we don't like Lula either, but at least, he's not like as bad for us as Bolsonaro, even though we don't like him either. But so similar thing happened, in all our other countries as well. There is, in the case of Peru, like I said, the media, the mining industry, the banks, even you could even argue the drug trafficking, rings as well.
Yeah.
And the case of Ecuador is similar things. There's a lot of power from the printed press, from the the televisions, from a lot of the mining industry as well, and a lot of the just same old elites, that because they have more Spanish blood, they just feel like they're superior, and a lot of them also have inherited, like in the case of Novoa, but even to a greater extent, have passed down, their lands, their banks, and all that. And Correa, when he came in, he was, there was an attempt at first from Jaime Roldos, who was the first president from the transition, who died in an accident, helicopter accident.
Mhm.
But then Correa was really the first one who was really able to confront them and actually, have this big redistribution of wealth, of fairer taxation, upon those who were richer. He was able to control the commerce and all that, so that this flowing amount of neoliberalism that was going on was put to an end. And obviously the people in there who throughout decades benefited from all those, from the neoliberal system and the neo-colonial system, and having their power, they get stingy about that. So then, like like you guys mentioned, what do they want to do? Well, we don't ever want these people ever to come back, and so they just hammer them as much as they can. Was there corruption in the Correa government? Yeah, that is true, there was. And so they're playing in people's hatred of corruption and chaos, to
Yeah.
say, let's look at us. We're taking out glass because this is what the people also want. They're pulling like a pilot, with Jesus. Like it's like, oh, what do the people want? They want Jesus, to die. Let him take. And also in the case of Peru, it was a similar case, and in Peru, it's even at times much worse, because what we see going on also, and we've seen it going on for the past years, for the past year under Dina Boluarte, is that they're trying to put down, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of thinking of people, because a lot of these elites, the people in the media, and the banks and such, they're so upset that someone like Castillo beat them, that it's like we don't they're going through a rewriting of history. For example, all these trials of convictions, Fujimori, for example, got released from prison. They're saying like, no, that's just a bunch of these left wing woke nut jobs who are just like humanity and all that softy stuff, when in reality they were actually crimes against humanity that were done. But they're trying to do this rewriting of history, making it seem like, no, this was terrorism, no, this was right now in Peru, crime was going up, no, this was criminals, and Fujimori was trying to put order, and all the woke mob is just trying to be all hypersensitive. So in Peru, we're seeing this social engineering by all these elites who were so upset when Castillo won the election, because he was a nobody, that they're putting down a lot of the freedom of thought, a lot of the freedom of assembly in universities, and also trying to have this lawfare being done, because they want to make sure that no one else dares to defy them again. No one else ever dares to actually go up there and win and beat them again, because obviously that hurt them a lot. It hurt them a lot when Toledo came into power and all these, cases, for crimes against humanity were done in the international courts under the Diego Garcia Sayan. That hurt them a lot because a lot of their military friends got in trouble. It hurt them a lot then when Vizcarra came in and he did a lot of this reshuffling in the judicial system, because a lot of their corrupt friends in the judicial system were now done with. And ultimately, it hurt them a lot when 3 years ago Castillo won, because Castillo, put an end to a lot of distraction, and also worst of all, he had nothing and he beat everyone. And that obviously hits their pride as well. So now this is just also hatred that fuels a lot of these people, hatred and revenge, that they want to make sure that don't you dare go against them again, don't you dare try to beat them, because we're going to show you what we can do to you. So yeah.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a resurgence, especially when you see with the Dina regime and what's going on with not Ecuador, Argentina, for instance. There's a resurgence of the right wing, because they realize that neoliberalism isn't working in Latin America. If anything, it brought more validity, it brought more power and inspiration to the left, and they need these regimes. They need the motherfucker from Argentina, and they need Dina. I try not to be derogatory towards women, but we know how Dina is and how we feel
Dina
about
the
her.
dinosaur.
The dinosaur. So like it's they need these figures to thrive, because they're losing. The hegemonic hold is losing, and we know who's the hegemonic. The U.S. Sorry, the U.S. is the bad guy. I don't know why we have to keep reminding people that, like,
Because it still is.
no one wants to believe that.
Well, speaking of which, the U.S. Congress is putting a new round of sanctions onto Nicaragua. So tomorrow there will be protests in Washington, D.C. To show their solidarity with the Sandinista government. And speaking of which, there's a lot to talk about in Nicaragua's case here against Germany. Against Germany, and their total support in solidarity with the people of Ecuador, with Mexico, the government of Mexico, and also with the people of Palestine and the government of Iran. So Nicaragua, I've been there before. It's a very beautiful country. It's very different from Peru, although the weather is quite the same. When I landed, it felt exactly like going back to the Peruvian Amazon, but it is a different style of government. I love the socialist government of Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Peru
Ortega.
is, yes, and Daniel Ortega, Comandante. But yeah, Peru has this right wing, these fascistas, these people who are anti-feminist and patriarchal, anti-gay, and still with the same mindset here. And that's what's still in power right now. Even though there are some Marxist-Leninists in Congress from the Peru Libre Party, still trying to stop the government, impede it a bit through motions of impeachment. But yeah, in Nicaragua, it's quite different. It's the Nicaraguans' view that the country is peaceful. It doesn't have this type of same case of crimes and disorder like in Ecuador, Peru. The recent poll, for example, in Peru, 85% of Peruvians despise the Congress. They reject it totally. I think it was previously in the 90% when the protests were happening a year ago. But yeah, it's it's very terrible. We all recognize that this government is corrupt. It's completely demonstrable, genocidal even. Some say, but the same thing with the U.S. When it comes to Palestine and Israel, and here in domestic issues. But in Nicaragua, it's actually 80 to 90% Nicaraguans supporting the government of Daniel Ortega, continuing the legacy of the Sandinista government since the revolution, and yeah, they're taking a case against Germany for their complicity over their support of Israel. This is one of the countries that Nicaragua said that they were going to go after. So it seems like they're going to be doing it one by one. So it was Germany, the United Kingdom, I believe it was Canada as well, Belgium, and I think as well as the Netherlands. But yeah, they're going after Germany, just like how South Africa went after Israel, and Germany, just like Israel, is saying that all these allegations they're all false. Even though Germany has been supplying weapons to Israel, just like these other countries I mentioned, including the United States, of course. Our home country here, the United States, the biggest baddie. It's very terrible that we are living at this time. 6 months already into this genocide, over 34,000 civilians and people who could have been alive today, who have their lives already ruined. I mean, millions displaced. Some are, well, whilst some are able to flee to out of Gaza, many are still staying in the territory to say that they're not going to move an inch anymore. They've been moving all the way down to Rafah, the border where Egypt lies, and Nicaragua has been showing their solidarity with the Palestinian people, renaming one of the parks, streets in I think it was Gaza is called now. But they besides their case that they're taking, they're showing their solidarity with by closing their embassy in Berlin, as well as in breaking diplomatic ties with the Ecuadorian fascist government. Same thing with Venezuela, because it might also look that the Daniel Noboa government, since it's partnering with the U.S. So firmly, that they might go after these their neighboring countries. So in that sense, they have to break relations. Venezuela recently did that with Argentina. Argentina had a series of that too, with Colombia and others. But yeah, it's a division in the Patria Grande that the U.S. has been sowing. And this divide and conquer has been going on for a long time, just like in the Pan-Arab project, the Kingdom of Jordan, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Egypt. These are governments that are pro-Western, have normalized their relations with Israel, including all the way to Morocco, the other side of the Arab world, at the edge there. And so these countries governments are against the people of Palestine. They don't want to help anything at all, and they just want to show theatrical airdrops, even those airdrops have been killing people. And it's not the only.
Follow the money, Paolo. Follow the money. Don't forget that Egypt, and that's the interesting thing about El Sisi, because El Sisi is, I was surprised at first because El Sisi is a military, he came to power under a military coup. And the Egyptian
Okay.
military has a long tradition of being very pro-Arab, from the times of Mohammed Naguib and then Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the great pan-Arab revolutionary in Egypt, and then Anwar Sadat, who did the Camp David Accords, and then with Hosni Mubarak. So I was surprised, by the attitude that Egypt had towards a lot of the Palestinian refugees and a lot of just this whole thing. And what is it? That Egypt has a huge debt and relies a lot on U.S. money. A lot of
Yeah.
U.S. aid goes into Egypt, and then the same thing when it comes to Saudi Arabia and a lot of the other countries. Jordan, Jordan, it was King Abdullah. He has
The
a lot of
traders.
business interests and trade with the West, and then Bin Salman. He's trying to be this modern guy, who isn't abusive to women and to homosexuals. He wants to, be this guy who, we're cool, we're better. And so obviously, if he starts, not looking good towards the West, towards Germany, well, his whole roof is gonna fall down. He's trying to be this new age, Saudi emperor, and he needs his whole theater to happen through. And because that's the thing about Saudi Arabia, if they really wanted to, they really could do a lot of things when it comes to the Israel-Gaza thing, because Saudi Arabia owns a huge part of the U.S. economy. A lot of the Saudi petrodollars is invested in the U.S. economy. I think it was something along of like 20% or so, that a lot of the because of the oil between the U.S. and the Saudi different oligarchs, and who have close connections to the crown ever since the 1970s, which
Yep.
is when this whole thing began. The Saudi kingdom could have a lot of influence in the decision making of a lot of the U.S. politicians. But obviously, he Bin Salman, I don't think he has that in his plans, because, like I said, he's trying to pander to the West so they don't, eh, talk him down for the things that he does. And let's not forget about Jamal Khashoggi too. Nothing ever happened out of that. So
Yep.
that man is playing his own thing. So yeah, it's kind of sad and unfortunate to see how people and the governments of, for example, Egypt, are leaving behind their history, leaving behind their own blood, their own culture, because of debts, or in the case of Saudi Arabia, because of convenience. They're leaving behind, helping out their own kind, their own people, their own people with similar cultures, because of their own personal or international interests that they have. So yeah.
Yeah. And we have a question here. Right here we go. What are countries outside of Latin America are the biggest supporters of genuine left-wing political goals in Latin America? Who are the biggest allies?
That's an interesting question. I feel like a better way that I would like to answer it would be more talking about like not left-wing politics, but more, I guess, a goal for sovereignty. So I know you've been talking a little bit about the U.S. hegemonic era, and in Nicaragua we had the Contras, Argentina, Chile. I mean, we could talk hours alone on just different military occupations from U.S. imperialism, and some of the developments from that, some of the tools that have helped kind of liberate Latin America from U.S. grasp. One of them was actually the CELAC, which has had a big impact on almost everything that we've discussed today. So I want to say right after Honduras had a coup in 2008, Manuel Zelaya, the CELAC was created, and it was spearheaded by, in Ecuador, Correa, in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, and in Brazil, Lula da Silva. And right now, the president is Xiomara Castro. And right now, when we see the condemnation for Ecuador, that was all, I want to say this week, CELAC had a summit where they discussed about I guess, or they supported, I guess, the Mexican government. And CELAC is just a big creation that's aimed at creating unity in Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's comprised of 33 nations, and the only 2 nations from all of the Americas that are not participating in it are Canada and the US. And although there's, the creation of CELAC, required the participation of Colombia when they had right-wing governments. And currently right now, there's still right-wing governments that are part of it, but it's still part of a project that aims at having more sovereignty in that region. And it's seeing a lot of success in, right now backing up AMLO, but it's also, aiding right in Venezuela. Right now the relationships with Venezuela and different nations, AMLO, when he first started his presidency, he wasn't, close with Venezuela. And that's something that's developed in these organizations. They've kind of, allowed this participation to happen. And even when we're talking about the conflict in Venezuela and Guyana, one of the nations, or actually one of the leaders, I should say, the president, who, kind of spearheaded the, easing of tensions between these 2 nations, that was Lula da Silva as well.
Wow. Brazil is the most richest country in Latin America, right? Or would you say another Latin?
Well, so like Brazil and Argentina, in terms of density, because of their population, and also because of a lot of their exports, they have the biggest economies in Latin America. So the G20, and like, for example, has Argentina and Brazil, and then also Mexico. So I'd say, yeah, like the 3 big powerhouses in Latin America, would be Mexico, Argentina, or Brazil, and then Argentina. And then, there's the rest of our countries, which have a lot of, you can even argue that a lot of our countries have more wealth, because of our resources, because of, the impact of, our geography, or, the Andes, the Amazon, the tourism that happens. But that still isn't translated yet into, the level of economic power that Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico has. So,
Yeah.
well, Chile has a big economy too, but also because their population is not as dense, and their exports are not as dense either, they obviously don't make that list. But for example, when that does come to, like, let's say, quality of living, for example, Chile does tend to be in a higher standard. Not in the whole country, but on average, Chile has a higher standard of living. But that is not reflected into who are the big powerhouses economic wise.
The reason why I asked, because I'm thinking, pertaining back to the question, how important the BRICS will benefit off of the Latin countries that they have involved already so far. And I think that could be the contrast to what the right wing solidarity movements are, and stuff like that.
I want to go back to the previous question about who are the biggest allies of Latin American genuine groups, left-wing governments outside of Latin America. They used to have the backing of the Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, the Soviet Union, of course, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. I don't know if China played a big role there internationally, but Iran nowadays, as it stands, has been showing that it's supported with trade deals with Venezuela over their oil industry because of the sanctions, the sanctions placed by the U.S. Illegally onto Venezuela, the embargo over Cuba, and other sanctions, even more being added on and on top of Nicaragua. So these countries have been seeking relations in the East more so, especially with Russia nowadays as well. Since 2022, I've been seeing that they've been building more with a partnership. In 2022, that was the point that where we could see much more visibly that this multipolar world is emerging, and so it's definitely changing the world. But yeah, in Latin America, it used to be much stronger when Chavez was alive, when Correa was back in power, and the previous time before Bolsonaro, but when Lula, he was the original founder, still in power right now for the BRICS and geopolitical economy. This is shaping the world now. And they tried to invite Argentina, but Milei, the anti-communist, anti-lefty, is anti-China as well. He's just he's an ideologue, so he's going to ruin his own country's economy. Libertarian ideology.
I wouldn't say Milei is an ideologue. I'd say he's more of a fanatic. He's like a child who has this childhood superheroes, and for him it's Israel and the U.S. and no matter what, I'm gonna go for there, and like a petulant child also is like, no, I don't want no communists, I don't want nothing left wing at all, which is interesting too, because for someone who preaches so much free market and how laissez-faire and the government should back away, it's like, okay, like if you can make cash out of doing business with Chinese governments, whether it's from the government or from private entities, you should let that happen, like, isn't that what this is all about? So it comes into conflict on what he advocates. And then also I just wanted to add a few more when it came to what Paolo was talking about. There is also during its time, Algeria was to a big ally of Venezuela and some of the countries in the Caribbean when it had to do with Petrocaribe, and then when they had Bouteflika when he was president back in the day, until recently. And then I also wanted to throw in there Spain during the years of Zapatero as president of the government from 2004 to 2011. José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, he was the second president of the Spanish Workers' Socialist Party. He had a very close relationship with a lot of the countries, especially the left-leaning leaders, with mostly Evo Morales. They did a lot of projects for developing infrastructure with clean water, with the building of roads in Bolivia, and then also in Ecuador as well. He had a close relationship there. Zapatero's also been after he left the presidency, he's been someone who has tried to do a lot of mediating when it comes to the conflict in Venezuela between the opposition and the government, and also been a big advocate actually for Latin American integration, something that Hugo was talking about. CELAC, there was also the project which became reality of UNASUR. There was also UNASUR was really the big one. Mercosur, but that was previously, but UNASUR, which was a similar thing, but more of South American countries. Zapatero was also, someone who really, as a Spanish guy, he advocated a lot for Latin American sovereignty. And it's interesting too, because he actually went against his own corporate, people in his own government and also in the Spanish enterprises when it came to forgiving removing things like the debts that different countries had with, for example, Telefonica. There was, I think it was Bolivia who had a huge debt with Telefonica. Zapatero was like, no, I'm going to let this slide. You don't have to pay them back or pay us back at all. And then I think in that sense, he's been kind of busy also, but he has been in his earlier years, especially in his first legislature, the current president as well, Pedro Sanchez. He has taken a more a stance of maybe not with Mexico, but for example with Bolivia, he still has continued that relationship, and also talked a lot also in the mediation with problems in Venezuela. So yeah, I'd say also Pedro Sanchez with Alberto Fernandez when he was in president of Argentina. He visited Central America, to see Xiomara Castro, to see Gustavo Petro and Lula da Silva as well. So he's a bit busy now because unfortunately Spain is part of NATO, and he's busy trying to deal with pretending to be all anti-Russian and everything. But it is true that unlike previous Spanish presidents, and especially when it comes to that western part of Europe, usually the socialist workers parties who have been the presidents, Zapatero and Sanchez, and even Felipe González before he turned all anti-left wing in the 80s and 90s. Felipe González used to be close to Fidel Castro as well back in the day. So Spain at times does tend to have under its left-leaning leaders a bit more of a conciliatory, a more closer proximity of dialogue with South American left-leaning leaders as well, which helps a lot in building those bridges between the West and South American left-leaning leaders.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah,
Actually,
Spain is right now. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go for it.
Spain is also talking about getting Palestine recognized again, which is something I totally am happy to hear. But yeah, like you said, I mean, their policy with Russophobia is just like interesting to me. You mentioned Malay. We got to talk about this goofball. He's just a very interesting character, and I just don't understand what happened, how he got elected, because I thought there was a left president that was running that was very popular, but maybe I'm getting my countries confused, because then when someone was assassinated in Argentina, right? It was no.
Someone was assassinated in Ecuador. There were multiple assassinations in Mexico too, actually.
Yeah.
But there was an attempted assassination against a non-presidential candidate, Cristina Kirchner.
That's who I'm thinking about. Yeah. So, but with Malay, is he basically a populist like Donald Trump is? What is his story, and what does he want for Argentina?
Well, he's an economist, and he goes by the neoliberal style of governing. And as we're seeing, with a 50% raise on his own salary, and huge cuts to his government 50% jobs, in cutting, slashing all the departments. Even the Department of Education, Health, and all such. And so it's been devastating for the people, all these violent changes here. And now people have been rejecting him through the means of demonstrating in the streets, in the thousands or tens of thousands in Buenos Aires. And yeah, they've been out in the streets month after month, and recently, with a couple of commemorations on April 2nd was the historically known as the Day of the Veterans and Fallen of the Malvinas War, which just the same time Laura Richardson was there. He was taking a photo with her, showing that they're uniting with this position on having this U.S. base station there, making a new shape of U.S. allied countries on the west side of the South American continent. And yeah, the economy has been going terrible for the people. And Milei is a fanatic, as Nico has said. He loves Trump, he loves Bolsonaro, he loves Netanyahu. I can't even imagine how it's going to look when Trump, if Trump gets back into power here in the U.S. That both of them are leading here. We're just missing out with Bolsonaro.
Yeah, it looks like this is a very. Would you say this is a huge win for the West having Milei? And with an economy like Argentina, part of the G20, and I really feel for the people in Argentina right now with seeing all those protests and everything. It's definitely going to be, like you mentioned, Bolsonaro. Like, there's no telling how this is going to be playing out.
Yeah, well, Bolsonaro, he's also, a wannabe dictator. He loved the military junta back when they were there in power, and whereas Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff were out as activists, as political leaders against this the dictatorship back then. They were political prisoners long ago there. But here in Argentina, their Milei has made a questionable claims that he does not believe that the statistics, the truth, the commission of what really happened during the time of the Argentine military dictatorship, where there were like 30,000 disappeared people, people who had their children taken away. What was that, Hugo?
No, yeah, statistics are definitely not his friend. I mean, right now, extreme poverty.
Sounds like Trump.
I mean, it's 60%. So it's, these austerity measures, they do have like real life consequences. One of them is the poverty levels that are rising, but we also see it in employment. So all these cuts to the different departments, they accumulate to 700,000 jobs that are going to be, disappearing. And a lot of different unions, a lot of different social groups have been organizing, and they've, like Paolo said, they've been mobilizing. And the state, the way that Milei is handling this is by militarizing everything. So there's a lot of persecution going on right now to prevent more mobilization. So we are seeing a little bit of how the neoliberal policies kind of go hand in hand and are starting to lead into the totalitarian aspect, the totalitarian side of Milei. Great.
New war criminal, literally. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I just sorry, I had to charge my phone. I wanted to also just pitch in on Milei. The thing, you're asking how did he get elected? Well, what happened is that Argentina, under the second term of Cristina Kirchner, it did take a bit of a economic hit because of the debt that they had to pay because of a case that they lost internationally. The economy, as every capitalist economy, tends to slow down when exports go down and such. But then, unfortunately, there was a lot of, mass propaganda done and everything, and they elected Macri. And Macri was this big, neoliberal who, cut a lot of, the social spending, similar to what Milei was doing here, but in in a way that was, never seen before. This is uh, almost, similar to what was happening before, but with Macri, he also, what he did is that he opened up, the exports. He opened up what's called like the trade, cepo. Basically, there was a trade, there was restrictions in the buying of US dollars. He opened that up, and so what basically happened was that a lot of US dollars flew out. A lot of people took out their money abroad, and also a lot of when you open up the imports, a lot of the local industries took a hit. He also took out the subsidies, so a lot of small businesses also took a hit. A lot of families took a hit, and so that was kind of the
Jesus.
inheritance that then the Fernandez government, who, when they had a center to center left wing coalition, came into power in 2019, they inherited that mess, and unfortunately they had to do Macri also took a big loan from the IMF that actually had to be renegotiated under the previous administration, which was terribly done. And so basically, what the previous administration was doing was, paying back the loan and cutting a lot of, social spending. The economy was not recovering well. They also had to deal with COVID. They had to deal with, a drought and stuff like that. It was a very incompetent government, the previous one. And so
Mm.
basically what happened is that people were just very fed up, and so here comes in this guy who, preaches all these things, expresses the anger of the Argentinian, because Argentinians are very, they're very loud people, they're very passionate, in what they do. And so Milei, I was surprised by the fact that, despite all the struggles, the center left coalition of Sergio Massa was able to actually get a very important number of votes. But obviously, it still wasn't enough, because the discontent of the majority of the population was huge, and they obviously bought this showman. They bought Milei's message of, the guilty ones here are the politicians, because it is true. In the previous decade or so, the politicians, the political class, the establishment class in Argentina just became very incompetent and very corrupt, and people didn't believe them anymore. So similar to Trump, this outsider comes in and expresses your anger. Kind of how Trump was able to appeal to the rural America. Milei was able to appeal to a lot of the very low income people in Argentina, because they felt betrayed by their political class. We voted for the who the Kirchners were very popular because they did a lot of things for helping out people in Argentina. And Fernandez, who was the previous president, was handpicked by Cristina Kirchner. And so they felt betrayed by that, because this man was so bad. And then the other guy, Macri, was also, very bad as well. So then obviously it's like, let's pick Milei. Milei is our last hope. So they obviously have bought that, and yeah, they're we're about to see what's going to go on. But that was basically kind of the background, and why this man was elected, because he was able to tap into that anger, and also the media really helped him.
Of
Really helped him get
course.
elected.
That Trump comparison is like spot on too, because even in the election, the opposition they coalesced around centrist Hillary Clinton. Sergio Massa was, he's by no means left wing. So definitely so many similarities.
Yeah, and I say, like Sergio Massa is an interesting character. He's a very very intelligent politician. Like I don't know, if I were to make a comparison, he would be probably like a Bill Clinton, like his level of political savviness. Like he's very, probably the most gifted politician Argentina has seen in the past I don't even know, like 50 years. And that's the thing though, is that he's also a bit of a chameleon. He moves from being with the left, and being with the center right, and being with the center left, and being with the center. He is, though, unlike for example, Fernandez. He does believe in certain things, though. He is a Peronist. He does believe that there needs to be a state run a capitalist economy. He believes in strong unions and in developing local industries and things like that. So in that sense, he did. I feel like he did have quite a bit of a better plan when it came to helping out the country. But unfortunately, the fact that he was also part of the previous government, and the fact that he's just, like I said, such a political chameleon, I think that really damage his reputation, because people are like, which Sergio Massa do we believe? We believe the Sergio Massa with Kirchner, the Sergio Massa with Macri, the Sergio Massa on his own, because he has his own political group as well. And, he was the Minister of Economy in the previous, government. So, he also had that bit of, bad reputation because the economy was doing so bad, even though a lot of his measures helped. He was a bit of a Keynesian economic minister, so he was trying to put money into people's pockets and help maybe stimulate the economy with that. But I think honestly, if this whole thing with Milei blows up, I would bet that Sergio Massa could be very much the next president. And I think if anyone has a capacity in Argentina to have mark an era of Argentinian politics, is definitely Sergio Massa. We've seen it in Argentina. There's Perón. Perón marked a huge era. And everyone after that is a Peronist. And then we didn't see someone with that level of appeal, to really market till we saw Carlos Menem, who was more of a neoliberal, Peronist, or some Peronists say that he wasn't really Peronist because he got rid of, government regulations. But then after that, we saw Kirchner's, with Nestor and Cristina. And I think that if the next shape that Peronism could take could definitely be, someone like Sergio Massa. He is, to put it in U.S. equivalent. In the U.S. there was FDR, who marked, the Democratic Party, and then Bill Clinton came in. He's kind of that equivalent, someone who can really mark the way of the direction that his party can take in the following years, and definitely his country as well.
Yo, that cleared a lot for me right there, because I was just thinking, like, back in 2019, I was like, I thought Argentina's government was more clear than this, and it definitely just surprised me when I saw a Milei win, and I was just so confused. but he won around the time when like Gaza started getting poor Gaza. So I didn't get a chance to look back to re-educate myself and re-understand. So thank you so much. We are about 2 hours in. Is there a country we haven't mentioned yet in Latin America that we should talk about? I don't want to take up more of you guys' time, but I know that we
did Mexico's election.
Yes, Mexico.
I mean, to kind of give like a right to the point, I want to say June 2nd is when the Mexican elections are going to be held, and currently the I guess the party in power, Morena, led by AMLO, Andrés López Manuel Obrador, he's leading the fourth transformation, which is a very big I guess goal of pretty much kind of how Nicolas said, a very Keynesian style of government. And the party is coalescing against Claudia Sheinbaum. Right now, she is winning in the polls by 20 to 30 points. And the right wing, the establishment parties of the past, the PAN, PRI, PRD, they've coalesced against or around Xochitl Gálvez, who is not very charismatic, not very likable. The last debate didn't really help her out. And when you're kind of, behind by 20, 30 points, those little mistakes are kind of something you cannot be having. There is a third candidate that's, I guess, from a social democratic party called Movimiento Ciudadano, I guess, Citizens Movement. Forgetting his first name. His last name is Maínez. But again, from the debate, apart from the polls, because he is, not polling very well, but obviously those things can change rapidly. He did discuss things, some that I found really interesting was, kind of like the last election in Argentina, when we're looking at the debates, and you were, seeing a lot of discussions about the free market. Some that I found refreshing was even the right-wing parties in the last, debate, which I believe was held like 4 days ago. They were all talking about social spending, social programs, which is, something that I found really funny from Galvez, who, again, she's being supported by these parties that were completely neoliberal when they held power. And Minus, although he is planning on, some social spending, social democratic party, he still has a lot of, discourse around making sure that they can both go hand in hand. A lot of let's let the private sector go hand in hand and work again with the state. So that's definitely going to be an interesting election. But I see Claudia Sheinbaum, continuing AMLO's legacy, continuing the fourth transformation. She did really well in the debate. She's on track to be Mexico's first female president. She was very poised. The second debate's actually coming up soon, and I just don't see a world where she loses those 20 some point lead.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, yeah. One of the things that Hugo pointed at, though, how these right-wing candidate is talking about social spending. Let's not forget, though, that the candidates who are supporting her are the PRI and el PAN. What AMLO calls the partido, not the partidocracia, la mafia del poder, the mafia of power. So basically, it would be the equivalent of the Republicans and the Democrats coalescing behind one candidate to defeat, the incumbent, let's say, progressive, nationalist candidate in government. That would be the equivalent of what's going on in this election.
PSL?
Huh?
A PSL, maybe, if we put it in the U.S. context.
Yeah, like let's say Cornel West was the president right now, and someone else is running, and it would be like as if the Republicans and the Democrats put in, I don't know, it's Chuck Schumer or who knows who, like in Anderson Cooper to run as president. I don't know. Anyways, but the interesting thing though is that these parties, especially El PRI, let's not forget that El PRI is the Institutional Revolutionary Party of Mexico. They were born from the Mexican Revolution, and they went from being this nationalist revolutionary party into then morphing into this kleptocratic neoliberal party. Around the early 80s up until basically now. But what they were known for a lot is, when Hugo talks about social spending, is exactly that. They would basically buy votes. They would, go into, the small towns, the rural areas, and the poorer areas, and just give, kind of like what similar Fujimori did in Peru, just give, everyone, free stuff and vote for me, because El PRI, we're the ones who are helping you out. Kind of Fujimori used to give out free backpacks, free stuff to all the poor areas of people who had just moved in from the inner parts of Peru, so that then he would garner their support. So it's that's one of the things too. Some of the right-wing parties now, the neoliberal parties in Mexico, both of them, they depend on social spending, ironically, because that is a way of having this interaction, how do you say, like kind of like this vote buying from the population, so that then, even though it's kind of like charity, how they say what's like I think it was Jimmy Dore, he said that charity is like the rich people's opium. Well, because if you really want to change things, you actually really challenge the hierarchies of power. But charity, it's basically you're keeping the hierarchies of power, nothing changes, and you're just basically maintaining people on life support while not really changing any of the reasons to why they're actually poor. So that is kind of how these two parties in Mexico for the past 90 years or so, were running their country was basically through, charitable things so that people would stay, afloat until, of course, Morena and AMLO came in. They're like, no, we want to come and, transform things again. We want to, nationalize our industries. We want to, build our roads. We want to end corruption, and we want to actually value what's ours instead of, always, importing and, bringing things from Europe and the US. So, yeah, I do think, and I do hope that, like Hugo said, Scheinbaum will get reelected or not reelected, will be elected, and she will continue the process of the transformation, which is, something that when I first heard in 2018, when Obrador won, it's like he was talking, this big fourth transformation. It's like, will he actually though, like, will he actually be able to accomplish such thing? And 6 years later, now I could say it's like, yeah, like the man really, there is a before and after him. There's a lot of stuff to be done, especially in terms of security against the drug war and all that. But there really is a before and after with Obrador, and hopefully this will continue.
Yeah, what was the name of the woman that's running again?
It's Claudia
Scheinbaum.
Claudia Scheinbaum.
Yeah. Some things I want to mention is that I have nothing to say, but just I love this government of Mexico currently here. I definitely think that Claudia is going to win. She came to Los Angeles actually when we were protesting in LA, yeah, downtown LA. Yeah. It's just a coincidence that I believe that she is Jewish descent, but she just had her Morena party staff officials coming here, and herself into one of the theaters to speak to the Mexican people who live abroad. And so it is just a big coincidence seeing her here whilst we were just marching for Palestine back in October. Yeah, but yeah, well, for AMLO, he's been having a really good approval rating that has been stable. It has been decreasing a lot. It's been well, people have been happy with the government's handling on a lot of things, but there's of course a lot of issues to tackle, especially with the drug cartel, which have been involved with the assassinating political candidates, similar to how Ecuador has been facing that situation. Which, going back to Mexico and Ecuador's relation here, now Mexico's President AMLO made a comment before this was their relations broke down. One of his conferences, he said that Luisa Gonzalez could have won if the assassinated candidate who was a right winger, but a journalist who an anti-corruption candidate. So he was assassinated, and that changed the political landscape in Ecuador's election back in 2023. And so this comment that he made, Daniel Noboa saw that. Noboa then declared that the ambassador to Ecuador from Mexico is persona non grata, but this person, well, this day after, on April 5th, that's when Jorge Glass was kidnapped when the Ecuadorian authorities were raided at the embassy in Quito. And so this was when Noboa started to make his move against one of the big countries up from the north, but it might have had the backing of the U.S. To do so. I mean, this it has been unprecedented at this level of hubris, of arrogance around these right-wing governments, whether it's in Ecuador, Israel, Ukraine, the United States, of course, has been acting this way, especially when it was the strongest hegemon in the unipolar world. Along with the UK, it's a smaller Western powers here. But yeah, the US, of course, being the top dog.
Yeah. I have one question here from the comment session right here. Cuba is Latin American, but what's been happening with the protests I've been hearing about?
No, yeah, Cuba is Latin America. It's just like in the Caribbean, so it's not like, South America. It's, kind of, it's closer to the US than to, other countries. But I think one of the main things in Cuba, it's I personally have, some differences with the ways that the administration has been doing some things there. But I think though that the bottom line though I think is because of the Trump era sanctions, that really made the problem there very, very bad. The Trump era sanctions, basically undid all of the progress towards more open Cuba, in its commerce and its transit, with the U.S. that had been happening with Obama. And he basically enforced Trump enforced the Helms-Burton Act of 1995 under Bill Clinton, which basically what it did is that it put a lot of restrictions on the trade, on a lot of the things that Cuba could do economically and also internationally. And so they took a big hit when COVID came in because a lot of their tourist sector was damaged because of that. They obviously had problems because of the sanctions to get a lot of their medical supplies, a lot of that stuff. And so basically what we're seeing right now is that people are getting desperate because of that. It's sad because of the way that how they a lot of countries think that putting sanctions on a government means that that's going to help out people, but it doesn't. It really does quite the opposite. It actually hurts people the most. And it's especially Cuba has a long history of always being dependent of someone. They were dependent of Spain, then they were dependent of the US, then they're dependent of the USSR. And then when the USSR fell, they really started to really be suffered because they started to suffer a lot of the problems in the embargo. And they don't really have big exports outside of like coffee or tobacco or sugar, and their tourist industry. And then also they had a lot of help from Venezuela back in the day. But then when the Venezuelan economy also took a hit, then they kind of again have and then Trump puts on these harder sanctions. It really subjugates that country a lot more. I mean, Mexico has tried to done its part in helping out. Mexico has been sending a monthly oil supply to try to help them out, but it's obviously not the same. But yeah, I don't know, I think like Hugo or Paolo can expand on
I
that.
can add some more on that. Yeah, well, Cuba, just like Palestine, it faces a really a big monster, and the U.S. above it, just trying to encircle it. Cuba, of course, faces these embargoes and sanctions. It's just like the siege on Gaza, whether they face starvation, whether they face scarcity on certain items for their basic living standards. This is how the Cuban people can really relate to the Palestinians. Their struggle for liberation. Well, and not to mention that if we defeat this monster, the Israel, and abolish it, the Palestinians will be free. But as well, the United States, once that is completely, the system is eliminated, we have a socialist government. Then we see that the sanctions are over. That the policy of destabilization in Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Peru, Cuba, Haiti as well, and so forth. They can finally start in the process of rebuilding and having reparations paid to them, reparations that are owed to them. I don't remember the numbers, and of course it's been updated, but the calculations were like a billion, more than a billion, tens of billions, just billions of dollars worth of GDP or such that Cuba could have made if these sanctions, these embargoes were not placed on the island. But yeah, in today is actually in Nicaragua, Cuba Friendship Day. And so talking about Nicaragua back there, of course, they also face sanctions. They're about to be in place with new sanctions by these Republicans and Democrats in Congress. The Nicaraguans, they also feel that the Palestinian struggle is so similar to theirs against the imperialists, the U.S. imperialists, when it came to the Sandinista revolution, when it came to the Iran-Contra scandal, but also the CIA-funded Contras in Nicaragua in the 80s, and this is actually the 40th year anniversary since Nicaragua took the U.S. to the International Court of Justice to put them on trial for that same transgression of having these terrorists, right-wing backed paramilitaries, death squads, actually, to continue the work for the Somoza after Somoza left and the U.S. came to invade with their own Nicaraguan, but the CIA funded, armed, and trained Contras. So after 40 years, the U.S. never held up to the end of this their obligation to pay reparations to Nicaragua, and technically, in the Nicaraguan government at the time when there was ruled, or when a few years later, it was with the Chamorro government declaring that they don't have to pay reparations, even though it's unjust to do so. But the Chamorro government, since it's a neoliberal government back then in Nicaragua, they sided with the U.S. By saying that we can skip that.
Their argument was that because under the Chamorro government, because we're receiving so much monetary aid from the U.S. now, there is no need for the U.S. to repay us those reparations because the U.S. is helping us, with our infrastructure by giving us, all these military. The
USAID, huh?
USAID, yeah, the USAID.
I did see a USAID building in Bluefields on the east coast of Nicaragua. But yeah, it was. It's been 40 years since then. And look at where we are now with Nicaragua going back to the ICJ and taking Germany now. This is where Nicaragua can succeed in this field, just like in South Africa. South Africa being the other apartheid state besides the U.S. and the Israel and Palestine. So this is a historical responsibility to do so. That's their strength here. Cuba has their own strength as well with their medical internationalism. and Venezuela as well has their own. But yeah, and Nicaragua is such an important country that we have to keep keep an eye at. People keep neglecting their struggle of sanctions. When at this time, the U.S. government is putting sanctions again onto Nicaragua, just because they're going after Germany, just because they're going after these complicit genocidaires. When it comes to Palestine, we cannot break our solidarity with them. It's the same thing with the other countries, the Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we keep mentioning the situation in the Middle East for the audience to listen, that this all connects. And it all connects because these occupations and these strangulations of economy are all coming from the United States, a third of the goddamn world. So when people are saying that Israel is controlling, well, the Zionists are controlling the United States, it's the other way around. The United States is controlling the Zionists. And people are saying that Cuba, it turns their back on their own people and they're starving their own people. No, it's the United States that's starving their people. But so it's very, very important to have these clarities, because
something I do have to mention.
Yeah.
I don't know, the Miami propaganda industrial complex is lacking, but I like to follow the Miami Herald to see what they're talking about. And I have not heard of these protests. The only thing that I can kind of like think about that would be similar to these events would be, I want to say a couple months back, there was a 14-hour power outage in the eastern part of the island. And I know there was a couple of streets blockaded. But apart from that, I don't know if the attention just, on a different region, or, I'm not really sure what specific event she's talking about. And, power outages, they make life a lot more difficult. I'm in Puerto Rico right now. This is our first week back. Our university was out of power for a week. So, we do understand, the inconvenience of that, but we also do understand, the root cause of that. Over here, it's Luma. Over here, Luma connected to Junta, and Junta is the colonial arm of the U.S. empire. And similar to Cuba, they don't have bad electricity because they just, don't know how to connect wires. It's connected to the sanctions. And actually, speaking of power outages, right now, Ecuador, I want to say they're on day 2 of their electricity crisis. So even, when we talk about the fiasco in the Mexican embassy, we could also analyze that as just, a distraction for a failed government. They had 90 days of emergency over there, where the military was cracking down because of crime. There was a month where 114 homicides happened, if not more. I don't know if my statistics are low on that end, and they've actually been extended now. So there's a big crisis. And right now, something that I love about Rafael Correa is, definitely you got to follow that man on Twitter. He has been reposting a little bit about the Ecuadorian media to give, people that are not from that country a little sneak peek of what it's like. And, all of this turmoil, they're putting it on Correa. It's Correísmo. It's kind of like a revival of what happened in the U.S. elections. The Chavez's ghost coming back to meddle. That's still going on. Actually, even when we talk about Peru, everything is about disorientation, confusing people. Right now, the right wing that's still supporting Dina Boluarte with the Rolex scandal. What is their, scapegoat for the crisis? Jose Cueto, a right wing congressman, actually represents us. He's a congressman living in Spain who represents all the U.S. And Peruvians in the diaspora living away from Peru. He mentioned in an interview, seriously, that all of this is because of meddling from Cuba and Nicaragua. So, again, there's nothing substantial. Everything is just about creating chaos, disorientating people.
Yeah. I want to thank you guys so much for coming on the show. This was really, 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 really informative, and I hope a lot of people learned a lot as much as I did. I learned a whole lot. It's like more connections than what I already studied. So this was really, really awesome. So
we appreciate you for having us. Actually, on your birthday.
Yeah.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Feliz cumpleaños.
Yeah, well, we had to cover a lot. Today was very big.
Yeah, the struggle is important, even on my birthday.
Yeah, and today is actually also the International Day of Political Prisoners. So we have to say free Pedro Castillo, free Julian Assange, free Jorge Glass. Yeah,
so many.
Free all political prisoners around the world. Free Imran Khan.
Imran Khan.
Oh yeah. Oh God. See, that's another episode. I'm getting. That's another episode. I'm getting together.
Another fascist government.
Also, the comment section saying happy birthday to me. Thank you so much as well too. I definitely would love to get you guys back on again. You definitely are friends of the show. Please, guys, like, share, and subscribe. To Lost. I always get that word. Just say it.
Los Renderos de las Redes.
Los Renderos. Yes. I always get tickled on that part. But please subscribe and follow to Los Renderos. And if you like what you're hearing, definitely check out their page and everything and see how you get involved, because we can't just be on social media. We have to make sure that we are constantly in the streets. That's the whole point, 24/7. So if you like what you're hearing and you want to get involved, reach out, DM. This is what these conversations are here for. So without further ado, I want to bid you all a really good night. And thank you guys so much for taking the time out to come on my show and have this great, important conversation. Into the audience, all you guys that have contributed with comments and also just watched and tuned in. I want to thank you so much for being a part of this incredible show right here. So this was the live stream. So you'll see the actual episode on Spotify tomorrow. So please, if you are a Spotify listener, definitely check that out as well too. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And have a really, really good day, guys. And well, not good day. It's nighttime. It's night. So have a good night, some good rest. And
free Palestine.
Yes, free Palestine as well too.
And
have a good day.
Blank period, yeah. I'm a black, brown, and indigenous. Gotta holler if you really feeling this. Gotta holler if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holler if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain.